Welcome to Roadmaps and Roadblocks. I'm Beth Osborne, Interim President and CEO of Smart Growth America.
And I'm Martha Roskowski of the Funders Network. We created this series to provide bite-sized, kind of large bite, information and stories about how the federal program that supports highways, transit, passenger rail, and active transportation got to be the way it is and how we can make it better. The series is for anyone who thinks we deserve a better, safer transportation system that gets people where they need to go. We hope to illustrate what's working, what isn't, and talk about how we can change it.
So let's get to our special guest. Today, we are going to talk to Adie. He is a senior fellow at Brookings Metro and an expert in infrastructure policy and urban economics. We invited Adie because of his work at Brookings on transportation funding and accountability, with a particular focus on how state departments of transportation use formula funds. Adie, I think we've known each other for a solid 15 to 20 years at this point. And I remember pulling you amongst other people into the secretary's office at USDOT to think during the Obama administration about better ways to measure transportation's impact on transportation. I think we came up with some good ideas. Too bad we didn't do them.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I thought we solved all the problems, but turns out we're still here.
And recently, Brookings has been on a roll with reports about how federal dollars, transportation dollars, especially formula funds, are being used, how state DOTs, departments of transportation are accountable and transparent or not. And every time I see one of these presentations, I'm like fangirling in the comments. I'm like, this is so great. I love this analysis. Yeah, Adie, you've been looking at how cities operate for a while now. Can you tell us more specifically about your experiences with the transportation pieces of that complex puzzle?
Yeah, totally, Martha. I mean, as background, I'm kind of passionate about cities and places. I grew up in Florida, and for this kind of audience, I grew up in exactly what you'd imagine. Like, the whole state is pretty much suburban sprawl, but I was trapped on cul-de-sacs, and yeah, you have friends there, but you feel like you can't get anywhere. And that's always been part of me. So it's, how do we create communities that are better connected? That, especially as I've gotten older, I have a family, I have kids, like how can everyone get around, right? Can get to their opportunities. I'm not anti-car or anything like that. It's just I want everyone to be able to get around, right? Affordably, ideally not impacting the environment. That's public health as well as actually like broader scale kind of environmental outcomes. So clearly we've got a lot of work to do in the United States. We've clearly placed too many bets on one side. And so that's really where we often come to the issue is thinking about cities, suburbs, the small towns that tend to be part of metropolitan America. How can we think about the kinds of investments we're making in not just transportation, but critically those land use systems that make them go together? Are we investing wisely? We spend a lot of money on transportation in the United States. We're not actually short on our investment levels. We're really with our peers. I think it's really a question of priorities, choices, who has seats at the tables, what kind of projects we want to build. And I mean, you both know this too. Your work is awesome. It's like there's an endless mine of activities here to look into, endless amounts of conversations to have to try to influence, frankly, where we're making those choices.
That's great, Adie. I grew up in Western Colorado in kind of suburban sprawl too. So, here we are, right? Transportation wonks united. So we invited you specifically because we want to talk about formula funding. It's the bulk of the money that comes from the federal government and it goes to the states. So can you tell us a little bit more about the formula funding approach and what works about it?
Broadly, we're talking about we've decided to build the interstate system. This is the 1940s and 50s as these debates are happening, and we settle on a system that we are going to tax all motorists, and we're going to put that money, we need to send it back out to build the interstate highway system, or what's like broadly the US highway system. It's the black and white logos and the red, blue, and white logos, right? And to do that, we say the states are going to be the ones that actually not just build it, but again, this isn't just a fun fact, it really matters. The states are going to own that network too. It's not actually a federal government asset, it's actually the states. And so what's the most efficient way to get that money out? Well, it's by formula. And we need to determine things by, and it's changed over the years, but like population, how many of those highway lane miles do you have? And broadly, that's how we deliver money. by the way, for the transit fans, right? We basically have, when you put aside those quote unquote new starts and the capital grants, like the bulk of that program too, the predictable stuff, that's Formula 2. By the way, that's community development block grants, right? Like the federal government just operates efficiently on formula grants. And so transportation is no different. So why do we use that system, especially now that the interstate system, right? It was marked complete by the federal government in the early 1990s. We are done building. So why are we still doing it? Well, there's a few reasons. Number one, and I think this is the most important. Do not buy the hype about we need a capital budget at the federal level. This is just my 2 cents. We basically have. That's what the Highway Trust Fund allows. That's what these formula grants allow. Would you design it the way from scratch? Probably not. I don't know if I would vote for it now, but it's what we've got. And it allows the states and any other recipients to think in multiple year dimensions, right? This is not like those one-off competitive grants that we've all been thinking about a lot over the last few years. It's actually, again, the bulk of the program is this money, and it's allowing them to think long-term about it, right? So that kind of certainty is extremely helpful. That accelerates project delivery. So the way to think about it, again, you may not like what these projects are, we can talk about that, but it's the fastest way to go from money in an account at the federal level to like shovels in the ground in a place, right? It's just really, really efficient. And then broadly, and I'll kind of try to stop here, is in theory, it also allows us to execute on national priorities. You can say, hey, this is what I want to do. Go spend this money and do it. And to kind of the tantalizing bit here is like, well, are we still doing that with this money? And that's truly like the multi-billion-dollar question at the federal level.
I mean, several years ago, you convened a bunch of people to ask, what is it that we're trying to accomplish with the federal program? I got to participate in it. That was a fascinating conversation. I don't think we made it to an answer. Do you?
No, we didn't. Our funding ran out. So for any philanthropists out there who want to support people that get together to do this more, it's really hard work. It's important anyone who does it. So just to put that plug out there. No, we didn't. And I think this is an eternal conversation. I'm really glad you brought this up, Beth. And like the circles of folks that probably a lot of us talk to regularly, we have some visions about what probably that federal system can be. There's other folks who have different ones. That's okay. That's the beauty of like a true like kind of liberal democracy, right? Is we can have those battles. My real concern at the federal level is I'm not sure if we've had that full-throated kind of debate yet recently. And so we're really stuck with this legacy framework to build a bunch of interstate highways that are long since built. So back to even the way you asked it too, Martha, here's what we do. We take this money, we collect it from all motorists, and then we just give it to the states. And not a lot of strings on what they can do with it. The states can decide how to spend it. It is accountable, meaning we know where they're spending it. There is like databases, actually, Beth, right? Your amazing colleague, Corrigan, like mines this stuff. Like we know where the money's being spent. I want to be clear, there's no conspiracy here. But the question is like, when we just let the states decide, are we getting our value out of our money?
Well, you're moving beautifully into question number 2, but Martha, it looks like you have something to add.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that point about the national vision, because I think you articulated it really well. I would say from my experience looking at the states, they're still operating on a vision of highways, that we need more highways. And we have not had that conversation of really what is the national vision for transportation and what are the priorities today.
This is the part I'd agree with what you just said. And I've been thinking about this a lot, right? And there's other people out too, I want to be clear. We've built up through federal money, and again, the state gas taxes are even bigger than the federal. So like, let's be clear, they're bringing their own money to the table. But we've helped them build up their own asset class. They own those roads. That's their business. Their business is those roads. When we're talking about local streets, transit systems, if you're not in like a Maryland or Rhode Island or whatever, right? Those aren't state assets. Show me a business owner who's telling me, you know what, I want to invest in someone else's assets, not my own, right? And I think we have to recognize that. And again, that doesn't make them bad people, right? It's like when they're looking at their balance sheet, if they're thinking about growth, they're thinking about their network. But I think I love the way you're raising, Martha, because it's like, well, yeah, that's your asset class, but that's just one part of a bigger system. And is that the right stuff to be investing?
Yeah, that's really well put. And Every time the discussion about doing things differently turns into a conversation about eligibility and flexibility, it leads to basically forgetting what you just said, which is you can give people all the flexibility in the world. No one says, I've got some money here. Let me invest in my neighbor's home.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is hopefully we'll go there, but like it's about, oh, I want to invest in my locals, right? Like I want to invest in my local colleagues, that part of their network. Some engineer in District X, right, in state Y, that's just like, honestly, that's not what they're waking up in the morning thinking about. They're thinking about how can I make this asset that I am responsible for work better? Doesn't matter if it's got no potholes on it, if it's just been smoothed over, they're already thinking about that other project multi-years down the line. Meanwhile, you get off the off ramp right on, quite literally on the interstate, and you see potholes, right? And like that state DOT engineer, it's just not their job to think about that the same.
That's right. Well, we're halfway into question number 2, which is what doesn't work about the way we distribute funding from the feds. We've already said that we're empowering the states and not articulating what their goals are or what they should be focused on. What more do you want to say about that? What else do you think is not working?
Yeah, we've got systemic procedural failure here. I want to be really clear. And that's not from a lack of people wanting to debate it on the Democrats and the Republicans, right? Like behind the scenes, they're constantly thinking about this. They're constantly tweaking it. What we published this work back in the fall that we are convinced gives us the pathway on reform. So let me just bundle these really quick. Number one, the long range transportation plans. If anyone's looked at these, you've probably looked at it for listeners, and you all have, right? Like city transportation plans. They're beautiful. They tell you where they want to go. Honestly, they're awesome documents. Like I inevitably open these. I'm like, who was the designer? Why don't our reports look that good? Like this is government at its best. States have those too. That's what these long range transportation plans are. The problem is they by law don't have any teeth. So they say we want, honestly, y'all, if you read the amount of states who are pro-environment that you wouldn't think from what some of their governors and senators say, I'm really being serious. Like they say it in there. The DOTs know, right? We've got to reduce our carbon footprint in most of these states, right? They acknowledge it, at the very least, to save people money, right, on more affordable transportation. So those goals are there. There's no clear way to follow through. We also found through this work, 33 of the 50 states are not even measuring their goals on it. So some other division who's not responsible for writing the plan, they're not even seeing where they're going. So that's one.
That's
Second,
2/3.
yeah, right. Yeah, it's all really bad news. If you want to get sad, go to Brookings, Google connect the dots. It will make you sad, but at least it will tell you why these things are happening. Second is what are called the transportation improvement programs, or TIPs. Specifically, if you add an S to the front for state, this is what the state says they're going to do. Those project lists do not connect to those long range transportation plans. So all those beautiful goals, all the work that's honestly done by typically the governor's team, the secretaries of transportation, these basically political officials, right, who've been elected, come up with a big vision. Then the actual division deciding projects, they say basically I'm not going to reference that. It's a huge problem. We also have no project selection methodologies that are public, which leads to huge mistakes, which then leads me, let me do one final, if it's okay, of a third complaint. Not just the measuring performance against those goals. We're not actually measuring the system's health well in terms of asset management. We're doing this really well for the state assets. They don't actually measure those local roads that Beth and I were just joking about, of where the potholes are. Because again, personally, it's not their asset. But what we know from the data is those are the lower quality roads. So we're really missing out on this kind of information stream back. There's also really few ways for the public to hold them accountable. And you see this at the local level. If you want to talk to a city council person or something, right, of hey, this project, you know how to find them. How do you find a bureaucrat at a state DOT in a city that you don't even live in, right? So, and again, that's natural. I understand why it's there, but we've got to improve the actual communication here with key civic groups and other actors to have a voice in the process. So we kind of got, again, if you can see, it's like a rotten kind of set of decision points, that just lead to these kind of outcomes where, it's not a lot of accountability.
It's amazing too, to think that if you fail, so you choose not to invest you've made state of repair a top priority, but your funding has not followed through on that. That's then the excuse you give for needing more money. And it's one of the most persuasive and most used talking points. So it's almost like the incentives align to reward those that are accomplishing the least.
Totally. It absolutely. And then even if you're accomplishing well, if you're
You don't
not
get
showing
the
systems
reward.
that are worse, you can always gold plate yourself even more to say, right? Like, well,
Yeah.
we all know this, like no road is ever perfect because the second rain, we all see this in like your local street that gets repaved, especially if it's, you got a bad climate, the next like winter or whatever, you're like, what is this road? It's like, well, you got to constantly maintain it, right? So there's always an excuse to invest more in your system, right? There's always a lane you got to widen, right? Or like an interchange, right? That generally get backed up near a port or an airport, right? Like, of course, you're going to want to endlessly invest in that system.
Do you have one, the third question is, do you have a particular story or example that exemplifies this?
Yeah. Let me go, if it's okay with you all, let me go like macro, because I think this is the crux of the issue.
Sure.
Local governments are grossly subsidizing these state governments. So this was the thing we've kind of finally put some numbers on that it's driving me crazy. I'm being upfront about it. I've told folks in Washington, D.C., if you will. So, and other folks are aware now. You can see my face. It drives me this crazy. We are over 30% of vehicle miles traveled are on locally owned roads. That is a proxy for gas tax collections, right?
Mm-hmm.
We then take, just at the federal level, we take 30% of those dollars and then we give it all back to the states. Meanwhile, then we turn around and have the audacity to say, local governments, why aren't you investing enough in your local systems? That could be your roads, it could be your transit operating. It could be in this, for people to really get fired up about this, this could be all the money you're not investing in schools and other public works, because you need to take more of your property tax dollars to supplement what you're losing in gas tax dollars to handle those repavings. People should be livid about this. What's the order of magnitude money I'm talking about too here, Beth? And we're talking about $10 billion a year in money. So just, I like wrote down in prep for this, like, you know, thinking about like, what's the story I want to tell? So in California, who has some of the best, what they call sub-allocation in the country, right? To give California DOT and the legislature a lot of credit, right? They give a ton of money down. Just on their federal money alone, there's a $2.5 billion gap per year that should be going to counties, municipalities, their councils of governments, right? That are their MPOs in the state of California. That could go really far. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars in metropolitan Los Angeles, right? Numbers below that, but high in San Francisco, and you can move down the list. In Florida, $1.3 billion per year, right? That localities are losing out and subsidizing Florida DOT.
So Adie, that's amazing research, and I hope it gets lots of legs. When you say that 30% of, basically 30% of the gas taxes that are going to Washington are coming from local roads, going to Washington, that money's coming back to the states. You looked at all 50 states, right? What's the overall number? They're not sending 30% of that money back to localities. Is there?
That gap in total across the system, 34% of VMT, 16% of funding. So you've got a gap of like double, right? Or in other words, they are not receiving back. What they receive should be doubled by the state. But the feds, they're actually kind of the worst actor of all here, right? Because they're giving it all to the states, requiring none of it to go back down to locals.
Well, and what's really interesting to me politically is the same states that are making that decision have spent the last 3 decades having arguments about a minimum guarantee of federal tax dollars. You know, my state puts in X amount, we don't get that back, and then they turn around and do it to their metro areas. But the other thing is the aggressive support for this system that comes out of U.S. Conference of Mayors and mayors in general. What? I don't think it's an answerable question, but I don't understand. why the mayors are giving cover for a program that undermines their priorities with their own constituents' money.
I think there's a lot of organizational rules and systems that one needs to understand to even make sense of this. This is one of those areas, it is right, and you both know this, and like it's really technocratic really quickly. And it's boring, it puts people to sleep. It's hard to follow if you don't have enough time. So I don't begrudge anyone who's not sure where to go. It was why the competitive grant making under IIJA was so attractive to municipalities, and give them credit, right? It makes sense too. Like,
So
you know
simple.
what? I've got a way to directly apply for the money. Why don't I just go for that?
Yep.
Meanwhile, to me, the much bigger fight is how do we get a piece of these guaranteed formula funds? And then to add this extra layer to it, what I think is a really important political argument, which is no, 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 we are putting money into the system. We're not getting our money back. You know, as you pointed out, Beth, this was always the state fight, back literally starting in the 50s. Like, how much should your share be, right? And that's an eternal fight. Any sector, it doesn't need to be just transportation. People are always fighting over it, of course, right? We see it right now at the time of recording, right? The immigration stuff in California, right? People bundled in just how much money California gives to the federal government. So this always comes up. I think there's a real argument here, whether you're a mayor of a big city, you're in a smaller community, you're at the county or even the metropolitan scale, to argue, not just in federal Washington, but your state capital, to say, where's my money? Where is my gas tax money? And I know I'm going off here. I want to put one last quick point because I think this really matters. It's easy to take this fight. I'm going to something like iterative thinking here, to say, oh no, we want to decide all of the national goals, build a better system, build the world in my image, whoever mine is, right? And I get it. We could do that a lot better. Here's why I think this fight matters so much. When you give cities money, they have much better lists of projects they want to build. They're the ones trying to build out bike lane networks. They want to make transit prioritization on, right, like Beth and I's both formal and prior hometown, right, or current and prior, of like on the 16th Street busway that a lot of people know about, right? Like those projects, if we have cities, counties picking projects, I'm confident we'll start getting much better projects in the system, right? Because now you're rewarding people with different assets than a highway network, right? And so it's not perfect, but getting money back to localities could make a huge difference in the kinds of projects that we're building.
So again, you've anticipated the next question, which is how do we fix it? But are there other things you want to add to that? Like, how else can we fix these problems?
Here's what I think really matters.
Okay.
Putting together coalitions. Again, I'm an armchair desk researcher, right? Like, this isn't what we do. Like, so I'm saying like baton pass style, right? Beth, you would do the stuff. Martha, you have experience here. Like, I'm as much talking to you two as others. How do we put together the coalitions to make the case to legislators, state level, federal level, to say, look, you're extracting money from these communities. By the way, all these legislators, that unless you're talking about basically the federal Senate, you represent communities. I can tell you down the street from your businesses, right? And we've already started to talk to chambers of commerce about this, right? Like, harder to get to work, potholes that all of you like deal with, right? Your workers, yourself, like, this is the source of this problem. How do we get through to them to talk about the changes, right? That we don't need more like large scale, limited access highway investments in America. We want to maintain those assets, we built them, but we can do that with a lot less of the funding we've got going there. Meanwhile, we're starving our local roads, our local transit agencies. So putting together those coalitions, this is now a political act that I think we need to be at. And there's a lot of data out there, I think, to help build up that case. So that's the big thing I'd put out there.
And it's interesting because within the context of reauthorization of the big federal transportation bill, there's already mechanisms in there that could send more money directly to the cities rather than going to the states.
There is, but it's
or no.
I think we could build. We put out a proposal for this. Like, we have our own ideas on. We think we should be block granting directly to locals. We are convinced of this. the quick plug is like, give it to the MPOs. They already have a like fiduciary relationship with the feds, splice it down to the municipalities based on the board structure in those places. The MPO doesn't even need to spend the money itself. Spread it down. If you're especially out west, right, where a lot of them actually do their own building, sure, you can keep some for yourself. You could do regionally transformative projects. You could just help every municipality do their paving. But we've got to send it directly to them. I think it's an illusion right now that the feds are actually giving money to the locals. They really
For
are.
sure. Yeah.
The exception is transit, right, Beth? I mean, then you're sending it to a transit agency directly. But they're not speaking for the full transportation network at a local level.
No, and one of the biggest challenges we find is most transit is operating on a roadway system that is designed, owned, operated by someone other than the transit agency. And the folks who own it don't know, nor are they terribly concerned about how you design that roadway to make transit operate well. So yeah, it's definitely not producing good results for the end user to have that divided jurisdiction and lack of full transportation, governance, coordination, performance measurement, project selection, the whole bit.
Yeah. And look, let me put in one other plug for this idea, because I think this is what's the number one pushback is going to be. Is from state-oriented officials. They could be inside a state DOT. They could be a legislator who's just thinking about it. And by the way, what I'm about to say, I'm not demonizing them. They're going to say, we have this money now. We've built budgets for multiple years. We're expected to spend that, right? And then they will also fold in this element, but interstate commerce. Here's the catch, right? We already send, and right, T4A has done some great work here too already to give you a huge dap. Like the roadway network, what is it? Like 3/4 of it's locally owned. We're not even talking about that. Those state-owned roads do huge lifting for everyone, right? They're what allow us to have all the goods in our houses that that you buy at the grocery store. They're so important. They really that interstate like corridor system, the U.S. highway network, what the state owns, it matters. But they already are capturing a huge percent of VMT and gas taxes. They can feed themselves. So to say no, we need, again, I'm saying this out loud, like AASHTO's public declarations, we want 95% of all federal dollars going forward. I don't know, honestly, knowing these stats, like how they can say it, right? Like asking for it. They're saying, I want money from local streets. And it feels like I really hope we can give the data out there to the legislators to be courageous enough to say, no, actually, you were subsidized. We know why we built this, like 3/4 of a century ago. But today, that doesn't make sense anymore. We need to right-size the system. Someone's going to have to be courageous in the elected office to say, we need to right-size the money.
So Adie, you've got this great information you want to get out there. Where can people find it?
Thank you. So luckily at Brookings, we give away everything for free because we're idiots like that. So you just go to brookings.edu. The state focus work is called Connect the Dots, but if you just say state transportation, Brookings, or my name, you'll find it. And then the most recent one around the VMT and spending is the term highway shakedown, which is, we think, what's happening.
Excellent titling work. I really like that.
Thanks. I'll pass it on to our comm team. I am not the one to get credit for it.
Well,
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here and sharing your work and ideas with us.
Thanks for having me. This is a pleasure.
It is always so much fun to talk to Adie. He's so smart and he's really clear on distilling complicated things and getting right to the point.
He's also so full of ideas and information. Anytime I see him or we get the chance to catch up, we'll put an hour on the calendar and we need 4. There's so much to talk about. And if you spend time in a room with him, all you do is generate more ideas of things that we should do and be working on and studying. And so, yeah, those conversations we had a few years ago with people about what the purpose of the federal system should be was incredible and definitely needs to be brought to a conclusion.
Yeah, and wearing my organizer hat, which is what I'm best at, I just think there's so much power in being able to augment the traditional transportation advocacy folks who are mostly in the progressive sphere, I would say, with the chambers of commerces and the mayors and all the people who care about the functioning of our cities and our communities. That there's a whole other swath of folks that if we can figure out the right way to bring them together and present this information and get the legislators on board with
Mhm.
this at local and state levels, that's how you get to the momentum of shifts at the federal level.
Absolutely. You know, when we were preparing for this, I came upon an interesting fact about Brookings. Their first major foray into transportation policy analysis came in 1949, just yesterday, when Charles Deering and Wilfred Owen, who were Brookings scholars, published a report called National Transportation Policy. And this document recommended the establishment of a federal Department of Transportation led by a cabinet level secretary. And they proposed coordinating various transportation modes from highways and waterways to aviation under a unified agency to streamline planning investment. And up until then, they'd really only focused on government efficiency. This was them talking about systematic infrastructure policy design. And so you look all the way back to 49, bring us forward to 2025. That's where we are, right? With Adie's work, and you can see that that's really where they've spent a ton of their time. And Adie's talking about that even today. And I just hope that his work gets reaches the same success as that 1949 report that said we needed to put federal transportation work into one department.
I think it's time for our sign off. The wheels of transportation keep rolling, and so do we. Catch you next time.